Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. I am using a different camera lens, so we're seeing how this works. I am using my cheaper camera lens instead of my more expensive one, but today we are doing the next video in my palette roulette series in which I review a palette that I have in my collection that you might also have in your collection. I utilize it for a subsequent amount of weeks, and then I come back to you and I talk to you about my thoughts, my feelings, the good, the bad, the ugly, and show you some pictures of the eye looks I was able to create, show you swatches of the palette, and then we pick a new palette. Today we're going over the Blend Bunny Lure palette. This is a palette that did come out in January, so as you can imagine, this isn't necessarily about the brandest newest thing on the market. This is about me utilizing the things that I have in my collection and bringing you the information that I deem important in my own humble opinion. And you know, I hear on the interwebs all the time with creators out here on this platform, as well as, you know, my subscriber base, that people wish creators like myself, would utilize older palettes on the YouTubes so that they could see some of the things that their older palettes that they maybe have are able to do, right? The things that they're able to do with the older palettes that they have, instead of only talking about the brandest newest thing. I'm here to tell you, I am that channel for you if that is what you like. This is like my 210th, I don't know, palette review on my channel, and many of those palette reviews are multiple different palettes. Most of them are older palettes. 9 times out of 10, it's not the new palette on the market. So, with that said, for those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta. I get a lot of education in my position, and I aim to bring you that education here on my channel, but ultimately I'm just out here talking about makeup because I like to talk about makeup, and I'm assuming if you're here watching my channel, you probably also like to talk about makeup, so let's just jump in. Let's just talk about some makeup. Today, we are going to be reviewing the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Lure palette. Blend Bunny is a brand that was new to me as of this year. I did purchase this palette and 2 other palettes from them when this palette launched because I loved this palette. I fell in love with the color story of this palette and really wanted to try this palette, and just picked up a couple extra palettes because when I try out a brand, I try not just to pick one palette, but to pick multiple different items from the brand so that I get a good idea of what all the brand has to offer. With that said, the other 2 palettes that I have reviewed are the Blend Bunny Dollhouse palette and the Blend Bunny Surge palette. You know, the reviews are kind of all over the place with them. Like, I love them, but there are some parts of it that I really don't love. So with this palette, I really fell in love with the color story and was intrigued and really needed to have it in my collection because I feel like it is a different take on a rainbow palette that maybe didn't come across in my collection. Like, I didn't have this in my collection, right? It was definitely unique. So this is what the palette looks like. The palette is $46 for 0.81 ounces of product or 0.03 ounces per pan. The packaging is beautiful. It's got the scales on it. It's got beautiful like shimmer glitters on it. I don't know if you guys can see that in the screen, but none of the writing on it is like raised or anything, but you can definitely feel the shimmeriness, the glitter on the palette structure. And then down here, it does say 24 shades for the mermaid within. On the back of the palette, it does just say Blend Bunny Cosmetics. It says it's 24 shades for the mermaid within. It's got some information about the palette. And then, of course, the information that always goes on the bottom of the palette telling you whether it's cruelty-free, vegan, what the shelf life of it is. And the shelf life does appear to be 12 months. And it is a palette that is made in China. Inside the palette, there is no mirror on it, which I think is kind of what keeps these like in a relatively decent price point. When I think of the price point for this at $46, some might think that that's atrocious, but it's $46 for 24 eyeshadows. So really, you're paying about $2 per eyeshadow in this palette, and it is phenomenal. Here's what I love about this palette. There are 18 mattes in here and 6 corresponding shimmers. As I said, this was launched in January 2023, and it does have the shades inspired by mermaid fantasies, pirates, ocean waters, all the things. I think it is beautiful. Let's just take a minute to view how beautiful this palette is. It is truly a different take on a rainbow palette. Here's what I would also say about this, like Blend Bunny's most recent palette came out and it's kind of all jumbled up. I think that this palette could have benefited from being a little bit more jumbled up than the gradient, although I do love that about Blend Bunny. They make it really easy to be a brand new person on the makeup scene. Even if this is your first palette in color, it makes it really easy to work with because everything is in a gradient and you go just straight down the row, have everything you need for an eye look in this gradient, right? You have a lid shade, you have a blend out shade, you have like a crease color and then a deepening up outer V. You have everything that you need for one eye look in each one of these rows. So even if you only utilize this for 6 straight days and only went monochromatic, you have a full week's worth of eye looks out of this. As creative as I am, I did struggle with kind of bouncing around in this palette. For whatever reason, it didn't click in my brain how the color stories could look different than they do in the gradients. So I do think that this palette would have benefited from a little bit more of the jumbly nature of a regular palette with the kind of chaotic color story-esque look to it. But I did love every single thing about this palette. This eye look that I have on today has this color in it and this mint in it, and then it has this shimmer in it, and that is it. Like, I think that it is beautiful, and it looks like it kind of has some purples in it, but it doesn't. It's just blue, mint green, and turquoise. It's so pretty. And what I would say about this palette is not only is it pretty and the packaging also beautiful, but the shades themselves, the mattes, I hear a lot of my fellow creators out here say how much they love Blend Bunny mattes because mattes are effortless. And for the longest time, I didn't believe that, but they really are. They are a matte that blends seamlessly on an eye look so that it doesn't give you any options but to be blended. And when you pack them into each other, there isn't a whole lot of voiding that occurs or a whole lot of like patchiness that occurs when you're blending them into each other either. What I would say is that with some of these darker shades, so like all of these darker shades down here, I did struggle quite a bit with keeping them in my eye look. So meaning that I would pack them in, and then as soon as I started to blend them out, they kind of wanted to blend away. But with that said, it wasn't hard to pack the color back into it and blend it out slightly, and then it would cover up any patchiness that lay underneath. So with that said, even if it creates patchiness because they're maybe too dark, too pigmented for you to use, which I don't find to be true for the most part. They are super pigmented, but not so pigmented that you just can't use them, which we all know is the case sometimes with some of these kind of shadows. I do think that even if it does cause problems on first blend, when you go back in the second time and pack more color on and blend out, it's seamlessly fixed at that point in time. They play well with each other, they build well, they blend well, they're amazing. What I would say though is I feel like these mattes are different than the mattes that were so easy for me in the other two palettes. I do feel like these ones were a little bit, just a smidge bit harder to work with than the ones in the other two palettes. And one of the palettes that I have reviewed in the past, the Dollhouse palette, is more on the line of like neutrals, so it wouldn't surprise me that these are harder. But the other one was the Surge, and the Surge palette, if you know anything about it, is mostly neons. As a matter of fact, I think it was just discontinued because they can't get the neon pigments that they need to make that palette anymore for a really decent price anyways. That one was easier than this one. As a matter of fact, I used that one to create an eye look for an 80s themed birthday party that I went to over last weekend. And man, the eye look was beautiful, and I did it in like less than 30 minutes. And with these ones, I felt like I had to work a little bit harder to get them to blend in that same way. So I do feel like the mattes are different in here. They do still feel very buttery to the touch as you're swatching them, and they are still super pigmented, but they do require a little bit more finesse than what I've experienced with Blend Bunny shadows in the past to get them to the opacity that you're seeing here in the palette. There is a slight bit of fallout also, and when I say slight, I mean slight. There is a slight bit of fallout with these shades up here, the darker of the shades, and with these shades down here, there is an incredible amount if you're not using a glue. But with that said, it's not impossible to get them to stick to your eye without using a glue. Them feeling different or acting different is not good, bad, nor indifferent. It just is, in my humble opinion. With that said, the shimmers also feel different. But I feel like these shimmers in here, so these 6 down here, feel different better. So in the previous 2 videos that I had, there was at least one shimmer in that bunch that just would not stick to my eye no matter what I did, no matter how much glue I used, it just wouldn't stick to my eye. And I thought it was a me issue until I tried the one palette also on my daughter's eye, and it just didn't stick. It was the shimmer itself, not all the shimmers, but it was the shimmer itself that I'd used. Specifically, I'm thinking Dollhouse palette and that really pretty iridescent-y purple that's in it. These ones I had 0 problems with, and they are so beautiful and so pigmented, and they feel slightly more creamy and moist to the touch than the ones in the Dollhouse and the Surge palette did. So with that said, I do think that maybe there's a different formula overall in this palette. I don't necessarily think the matte one is worse. I also don't think it's better, but I don't think it's worse. But I do think that the shimmer one is definitely better. These apply really, really well with your brush, but they also apply better with your finger. I think that that is a huge difference as well. In the last 2 ones that I have reviewed from this brand, those shimmers didn't pick up with a brush. At least these ones do pick up with a brush these days. I would say that they are more creamy as well, because you can see, like, even just putting your finger into it, it leaves quite the dip in the pan, and it makes it look like you've been using it for years versus just having stuck your finger in it once. So with that said, be very, very careful on the pressure that you're putting into the pan, because I could see these easily going to pan super quickly if you're not careful with how much pressure you're putting into the touch of the shadow on your finger. I did not find that even using my fingers that it created any hard pan issues, which is a plus. And I did feel like they adhered well with or without a glue. Of course, the glue is going to help them adhere to your lid and create the absence of fallout throughout the day, which I didn't find 100% happened, but that I could see, but I do know it happened, because at the end of the day, towards that like 10-hour mark, my eyes would be super, super irritated. And then the next day I would wake up and they'd be puffy and kind of weepy. And that only happens when I get, some form of like eyeshadow into my eye, as opposed to like the fallout that's created from these shimmers into my eye, as opposed to, it not happening. Even though they are more creamy or more moist than the previous shimmer version by Blend Bunny, these did not create any kind of creasing that I noticed in the time that I wore these shadows. And granted, I've been using this palette now for, I think, approximately 3 weeks. I've used every single shade in the palette multiple times, and I just find them to be so, so good. I will definitely, Blend Bunny is now on my list of, you know, brands that I continue to check out, brands that I'm interested in purchasing more from. I just love everything about them. And even as different and finesse worthy as these mattes were, they are still probably top 3 matte formulas for me. I would say that they're still top 5 matte formulas for me, even with them being as like fickle as they were. Not fickle, but requiring of finesse as they did. The wear time on these is, you know, really great. I think 10 hours with a primer. I would say somewhere around that 8 to 10 hour mark without a primer. The only reason why I say 10 hours with a primer is because at that point in time, that's when my eyes were starting to bug me and I would take the makeup off. So at that point in time, I know that the makeup was starting to move around a little bit, right? But there was no fading and it looked almost the same as it did when I put the makeup on in the beginning of the day. So I'm not saying that that's the stopping point, but what I am saying is that's when it started to irritate my eyes. So I did take off the makeup. So that's when you're going to find more of the fallout from like the shimmer shadows. This is probably the most aesthetically pleasing palette that I have in my collection. I just love the look of it. It is gorgeous. It's gorgeous on the outside. It's gorgeous on the inside. I wouldn't give this palette up. This is, like I said, rainbow palette overload. Be damned, because they went rainbow palette. You have 50. Here, have a different one that's totally unique and has a completely different, beautiful color story that is a rainbow palette, but completely different, if that makes any sense. The gradient that they put into their palettes is very useful, but I do think that this one would have benefited from a little bit more chaos to make your mind wander around the palette in a way to spark creativity just a smidge bit more, because looking at it in the gradient form that it is, I have a rough time figuring out which colors that I need to put together to make a beautiful eye look and which ones are just going to look gaudy. Also a palette that I found that you could go from normal looks, work appropriate, if you will, to vibrant and ethereal, even all in one palette. So I think it is beautiful in that way, because we have this very nice, beautiful, like everyday muted neutral column. This one here is a little bit more mauve-y than like a creamy beige, but it goes perfectly with this. And honestly, you could pair this brown and black with any other shadow in here and it's going to look beautiful and deepen up any of the eye looks that you can create with this. So I think that as it pertains to mix and match colors, like this row, I had a better time bringing into other colors out here, but other colors out here, I didn't have an easy time mixing and matching together, if that makes any sense. This could be truly a one and done eyeshadow look if it also had a really, really light shade in it, like even a pastel pink instead of this mauve, like a really light pastel baby pink would have been beautiful. A white would be good. I found myself really pulling this palette in for like all matte eyeshadow looks as well. And oh my gosh, they were so beautiful. So at this point in time, you should have seen all the pictures that I have for this palette. And you know that I think that this palette is amazing. What I am going to do is go straight down each row because I feel like that makes the most sense. And Blend Bunny doesn't put like descriptions of their shades onto the website, so I'm just going to kind of give it to you how I see it. So the first one here is called Pearl, and Pearl is a duochrome. It shifts like green, maybe even triochrome. It shifts green to pink, has a little bit of a golden silver kick to it. It is just so pretty, and I found that I wanted to wear this in like my inner corner almost every single day. It's so beautiful, and across the eye is as a lid shade. It was also a really great lid shade for just this in like a black outer corner and then like maybe a black liner. Such a beautiful just everyday eyeshadow. Then we have Storm, which is the matte like mauve tone color, cool tone mauve. Then we have Pirate's Life, which is the matte like cool tone brown. Then we have Black Sea, which is the matte black. I would say that the swatches of these should show you also that the formula has changed. Maybe not significantly, but a little bit, because the swatches from Blend Bunny are typically much better than this.
I've got like eyeshadow everywhere.
Okay, the next row is the green row. We have Folklore, which is a beautiful like tealy green. Then we have Seafoam, which is a beautiful like mint. This is in my eye look today. Then we have Mermaid Lagoon, a matte Kelly green, and then we have Uncharted. Yeah, Uncharted. And Uncharted is like a deep, like evergreen. Me makeup everywhere. Just so you know. This is the purple row. We have Charmed, which is a beautiful like fuchsia pink. Then we have Jellyfish, a beautiful matte lavender. Seductress, I would say, is a matte fuchsia. And then we have Tentacles, which is a deep plummy purple. I don't know if you guys can see it either, but like I have pieces of like eyeshadow falling all over me right now, and that lends to, you know, the difference in the formulation. Like I said, I feel like, maybe I didn't say it, but I feel like they're just a little bit drier. They do still feel very buttery and creamy, but they're also a little bit drier feeling and in appearance as well. It's literally everywhere. I think that lends to also why it's hard to keep the color in one place as you're trying to blend it out. They just took too much of the creaminess out of the shadows when they reformulated. Next I have the teal blue. This is the teal blue row, and we have in a bottle this beautiful teal shimmer. Then we have Lost at Sea, which is a beautiful baby blue. Sea Nymph, which is a like aquamarine, I guess. Then we have 332 meters, which is a dark teal. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to the other hand. So I'm gonna bring you guys over here. Do you like my little skeleton guy? He's gorgeous. Those are the pink row. Sailor's Delight, which I think that you guys can see is a beautiful, like this might also be a duochrome. It kind of shifts from like coral to gold. I would have preferred this to be a little pinker. I think that this coral doesn't quite suit this row, and I think when I swatch them all, you'll see. Okay, this is Baited, and it is a straight up Barbie pink. Then we have Booty, and Booty is a hot pink. And then we have X Marks the Spot, a burgundy. So I think that you guys can see that coral, it just doesn't go. It's the only thing, the one qualm I have about this palette really and the color story is that I just don't feel like that shimmer goes in that row, because that row is more pink and that shimmer is definitely coral. Okay, the last row, the blue row, and I have Bioluminescence, really pretty blue. Then I have Catch Me, which is a baby blue matte. I didn't swatch very well. Then I have Explore, which is kind of a cornflower blue. Then I have The Deep, which is the deep dark blue. So those are the shadows in this palette. And I think that you can see like it is just as stunning, right? It's so pretty. It's so pretty. I don't have any problems using any of these shadows. If I am 100% honest, these all performed very, very well. The only thing, like I said, is that I don't really think that this shadow goes with the rest of what's in this palette, to be honest, let alone in this row or column. I also feel like the mattes were just a little bit more dry on application, and I think that you can see that also in the swatches, than I have experienced before with Blend Bunny. And because of that, like literally the shadow got everywhere as I was swatching it for you. Literally everywhere. It's all over. It's all over. It's all over me. It's all over. With that said, this will be a palette that you will see at my end of year rankings. It'll probably be high mid range. I wouldn't say necessarily that it's a favorite. It might be in that green range. I'm going to have to figure out how many palettes overall need to be in what edge of the spectrum. Maybe I'll put it in the green range, but it would be low green. At the end of the day, would I purchase this palette again? Yes. I love this palette. It's got 4.5 stars on the Blend Bunny website. Granted, there are only 3 reviews on there for that, but the only other place to find a star rating for them has only 1 review, and that's on Camera Ready Cosmetics, and it has a 5-star review from that one person. I do think that I would probably rank it somewhere in the 4.6, 4.7 range, because I have a hard time giving any palette a 5-star, to be honest, but also because it did take a little bit more finessing and a little bit more work than I have experienced before in mattes for Blend Bunny. With that said, I loved the shimmers in this palette a whole lot more than I have experienced shimmers in other Blend Bunny palettes, and I just think the color story is gorgeous. I also think that it's not an everyday palette unless you have a really, really light tone single, like maybe a white single or a cream colored single, to help like just maneuver things a different way. It does go really, really deep. It does go really, really light, but I think Blend Bunny is also one of those, you know, brands that could benefit from having also a white in their palette. Now, I do understand that white takes away from the gradient in another place, but I still think that a white would have been great for this palette, specifically because of the pastel-y colors that are in here. I do feel like this is a palette that a person of my nature, you know, who's really into color and whatnot, could make this a one and done eyeshadow palette. I wouldn't have to have another eyeshadow palette to supplement. I'm gonna go pick another palette. I will be right back. I think there's a method to my madness that I'm not exactly quite sure that I am privy to at this point in time, but I did pick 2 palettes to come to you with next week, or not next week, maybe a few weeks from now, because there is an awful lot of shades and I do think that it's going to take me a minute. The whole thought process behind these is that I'm using every single shade and I'm getting a better idea of the brand, the formulation, the whatevers. So recently I did my birthday haul on, and I have so many palettes in my drawer of shame, which I also did a video on, that are so old in my collection that I want to get some use on. I did recently use one that I brought in for my Full Face of Drugstore, that if you guys haven't seen it, you will see it soon. This time I am also bringing in, even though there's a ton of other products in there that I want, palettes in there that I want to use, I am bringing in another one that is on my list of palettes that should have been used eons ago, and that is the Tartelette in Bloom eyeshadow palette. So I've heard some really great things about this eyeshadow palette, so I'm actually kind of excited about it. But there's a caveat to this. This is mostly matte, and when I think about Tarte as a brand, even their shimmers are not great shimmers, right? They're not great shimmers. They're not the kind of caliber of shimmer that I love. When I look at this palette, like, this is a shimmer and this is a shimmer, but the rest of it in here is mattes, and those 2 shimmers I could easily kind of flip the coin and turn them into more of a satin in an eye look. So I also wanted something that was going to present itself with the shimmers that I desire for my lids. And you'll know I just brought in some stuff for my birthday, and one of those things is the Adept Cosmetics Ninhydrin palette, and these are some shimmers. So I am super excited to try these shimmers with these mattes. I think that these will give me all the matte that I need, all the matte shades that I need to partner with the very beautiful shimmers in this palette. And this palette also has two mattes. So we have a matte here and a matte here. So I think that even if this doesn't go as like grape or as green as I need it to, those two mattes could be what I need to complete the look in this palette. I don't think that this is going to be a standalone palette for me. I also don't think that this would be a standalone palette for me because this is just not my color story of choice, right? So I'm super excited to bring these into the mix and play with them together over the next several weeks and come back to you and talk to you about my thoughts and opinions and how the palette's performed as I see it, in my humble opinion. With that said, I do hope that you guys are here for it. I hope that that sounds like something that you want to see, and I hope that you enjoyed this video as well. I have a lot of palettes that I want to be touching right now, but these two are going to be my focus palettes for the next several weeks. So I will see you guys to review these in a couple weeks, and until then, you know, I just hope that you guys had a great time with today's video. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions on the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Lure palette. Do you have it? Have you used it? What do you know about it? Do you love it? Do you have anything from Blend Bunny? Are you even interested in Blend Bunny? I would be interested to hear those thoughts and opinions as well. Don't forget to tell me also how you feel about this. I'm using my cheaper lens. I usually have a very long, wide, like telescopic, but it doesn't get super close. I feel like I'm all up in your face right now, but tell me how you feel about this lens. Tell me if I look better or worse on camera with this lens. This is the lens that I actually started this channel with. Well, I actually started this channel with a Nikon like Coolpix. So this is my first lens, and I got frustrated with this lens a long time ago, went to a different lens, bought a very expensive, very nice, beautiful lens that I have no problems with, but this one is the lens that I started filming on when I purchased this camera, so I just feel like it looks better in the monitor anyways. It looks better. You'll have to tell me if I look better on camera. It is whatever. It is whatever. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I hope that you and yours are well. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and getting along as best you can out there. And I hope that you are all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.